back to the Midnight Hour Show. You have reached the Midnight Hour on the Fringe FM. Fringe FM. Welcome back to the Midnight Hour Show with your host, Cambian, also known as the Mr. Man.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to another exciting edition of the Midnight Hour Show. The Midnight Hour Show is broadcast every Saturday night, exclusively here on the Fringe FM. And it is through this new partnership that we broadcast our show to the entire world. I've got to tell you, we are now at episode 9 of season 2 of the Midnight Hour Show. Because the first season of our show, which was comprised of 15 2-hour episodes, took literally years and years to produce. But this new partnership with the Fringe FM has proven to be extremely fruitful for us. Because through this partnership, we now have a schedule. We now have a broadcast time every week. And it has truly motivated me to get things done. It's also sort of forced me to do the hard work that I used to sort of procrastinate on. And I hope that this trend will continue. Now, along with the good, there comes some bad. See, having a set schedule and a looming deadline every week is good for your productivity, but it can also be bad. In the last, 3 weeks, I've had some 5 or 6 different guests cancel at the last minute, literally at the last minute. And that has proven to be extremely challenging. Because I don't have a huge roster of guests and I can't just call someone at the last minute to fill in for a guest that cancels. So I want to really say thank you to all of the guests who actually followed through and showed up and did the interviews as scheduled. And to those who scheduled with me and, something came up or you're too busy or, you got sick or whatever the case may be, I'd just like to say to future guests, really, I realize you're doing me a favor granting me an interview, but you're not doing me a favor when you cancel at the last minute, because that causes me a great deal of anxiety, honestly, and then suddenly I have to scramble and still hit my deadline with an alternate version of the show that I originally had planned. But then again, folks, it's kind of like that old saying, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. And this got me thinking. Many people have been asking me for quite some time now about my own UFO experience and what it is that got me so extremely interested in this phenomenon called UFOs. Well, the truth is, I have told the Cliff Note quick version of the experience that I had as a child several times, but always very quickly. I've never, ever told the entire story. I've never really opened up about that strange experience that I had as a child. And this got me thinking, why have I never really told the story? Why have I never really told anyone? And why am I now, right now, sitting here in front of a microphone, recording a show which is going to be broadcast out to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and suddenly I'm thinking, this is the right place, and this is the right time to tell that story in all of its detail, in every bit of detail that I can recall and remember. It's a strange thing, folks, to have an experience like I had. And I suppose, like many, I've never told the entire story because of the stigma that is involved with claiming to have such an experience, with the mockery that sometimes can come with telling people about a strange and paranormal experience that you cannot explain that you have had. And I suppose this is why I've never told anyone the story of the experience that I had as a child. In fact, I've never told any of my close friends. I've never told my wife even about the experience. Very briefly, I told her that I saw something in the forest as a child when she would ask me why I was so obsessed. That's what she says. I am obsessed with UFOs, flying saucers, and possible alien visitations. I think obsessed is a very, very strong word, folks. Am I obsessed? Well, since that experience happened to me, I followed very closely every news story I ever heard. I went to the library and read every book that I could find. And it's interesting, as a child growing up in, let's say, an economically disadvantaged area of the city, our library was pretty outdated. And what I got when I searched for books was some old books from the 1950s and 1960s about the UFO phenomenon at that time. But hindsight is always 20/20. And now I'm sort of glad that that happened to me, because I got to read about some of the strange things that happened in the 50s and the 60s, like the UFO contactee movement. People like Adamski and Howard Menger, who claimed that they were in contact with flying saucers and their extraterrestrial pilots from other worlds. I suppose I went to the libraries in my area looking for books to try to explain what happened to me, to try to explain what it is that I saw on that strange night when I was a child. And the truth be told, I never found any answers in any of those books about what it is I saw or what it is that happened to me. But I always felt like some of those books may have given me a clue about what it was that I saw, may have given me some insight into this phenomenon that, because of my experience, has affected me so deeply and changed the way I look at the world. And isn't it strange how seeing something that you believe may have been from another world can change everything? It made me realize that we, as a species, may not be alone in the universe. It made me realize there may be other worlds out there full of intelligent life and other intelligences that have developed perhaps a great deal beyond us and our meager technological level of achievement. It made me realize that perhaps there are others in the universe, others with the capability of visiting other star systems, of studying other worlds, of traveling to the stars. And these others just may be capable of exactly that. And these others may have found our pale blue dot, an oasis of life in a cold and barren galaxy, filled, we now know, with other planets. And yet, we have yet to discover a planet like ours, capable of supporting life. But not just capable of supporting life, capable of supporting complex life forms that have evolved for millions of years, that have been able to develop self-awareness and intelligence. We have yet to discover such a planet. But maybe the others have. And the others visit those worlds and study those worlds, their cultures, their religion, their technological achievements and development. And how would these others view us? Would they see us as an intelligent species with endless, unlimited potential? Or would they see us as a warlike race destined to destroy ourselves? And if they did believe that, would they intervene? Would they try to help us? Or would they simply let us destroy ourselves? And so I suppose this experience did change me. It made me more open-minded to possibilities. In some ways, it made me more philosophical about humanity and humanity's place in this vast, vast universe we find ourselves in. It made me question authority. It made me question things I was taught in school. It made me question science and the limits of science that I have been taught. It made me question religion and the lessons that religion has taught me. In short, my friends, the experience that I had was enough to change me and make me question literally everything that I thought I knew about myself, about my fellow man, and about our place in this world. It also made me open to the incredible possibilities that may be true. What if there are intelligent, otherworldly beings out there in the universe, on other worlds? And what if, my friends, those intelligent others are coming here to this pale blue dot to study us, to observe us, and maybe, just maybe, to save us from ourselves? It certainly made me question the government, because once you start looking into the government and what the government really knows about this thing called the UFO phenomenon, you begin to question everything. Why would the powers that be hold secret from us the truth, the real truth that they know to be true about these others? About these others visiting us, about these others studying us, about these others and what the government may have learned about what their true intentions are, about why they are here, why they are interacting, quite possibly, with some members of the human race. Why they may be abducting and performing experiments on some members of the human race. And what the government truly knows about this, has perplexed me, has tantalized me, and kept me digging into this phenomenon all of this time since I first had my experience. I believe the government certainly knows more than they have so far been willing to tell us about this phenomenon called UFOs. I believe that some of the so-called top secret documents leaked to the public may be genuine, or the information contained within them is genuine, copied from actual real top secret files. I believe the government knows more than it is telling its people about so-called alien visitation. But do I believe that we will ever get this thing that people call disclosure? No, folks. No. They have no reason. They have no motivation to disclose anything to us. This ruling class of people has kept and guarded this secret for so long now that to finally come clean, I believe, is impossible for them. And yes, my friends, this cover-up may have began with good intentions. And my friends, so many have asked me why I believe the government has covered these things up. And the answer is simple. You only have to look at those documents which you can read, like the Brookings Report. The Brookings Report was a 1960 report that was commissioned by NASA. And this report was a study of some possibilities about what could happen if extraterrestrial life were discovered. The report became noted for one short section that was entitled "The Implications of a Discovery of Extraterrestrial Life." And this report examined the implications that this kind of discovery would have on public attitudes or values. In this section, they speculate about what would happen, about possible public reactions to some very plausible scenarios for the discovery of extraterrestrial life. And the report stressed the need for further research. The report recommended continuing studies to determine the likely social impact of such a discovery and its effects on public attitudes, including the study of how leadership should handle information about such a discovery, or under what circumstances the leadership of the human race might or might not find it advisable to withhold such information from the public. And so this report, in short, recommended not telling the public if NASA should discover signs of extraterrestrial life or proof of extraterrestrial life, this report basically recommended that that information be kept secret from the public. This report was commissioned by NASA. And I believe, my friends, that NASA took that report and its recommendations as a matter of general policy. Because people that believe that extraterrestrial life has already been confirmed and that the information is being withheld by the government from the public can look to this report as proof or possible proof that it's true, that the government already knows about extraterrestrial life being a reality and has chosen to keep it from the public because of recommendations of reports like this and others that have decided we can't handle the truth, that society may break down, that world religions may fall as a result of being told the truth. I don't believe, folks, that humanity cannot handle the truth. And I further believe that it is a crime against humanity for anyone to withhold the whole truth, the entire truth, and nothing but the truth from the rest of the human race. If that has happened, it is one of the greatest crimes anyone could have ever perpetrated against their fellow man, to withhold such life-altering historical information. It would be the greatest story in history, folks, if we suddenly learned that there is extraterrestrial life elsewhere in the universe. And I do not believe that any government, any ruling class, or any person has the right to keep that information from us. Still, my friends, all signs point to that being exactly what is happening. And though there are many people right now very active in this so-called disclosure movement that want to demand that the governments of the world release all the information they have about this to the rest of mankind. But I have to tell you that I believe that disclosure day that many talk about, that many dream about, will simply never come. You see, if they have been covering up this for decades, I don't believe that they're suddenly just going to come clean. But that hasn't stopped some very principled individuals from attempting to force them to do exactly that. And I've got to say, my hat's off to some of those people who are perhaps a little more positive in their opinion of this thing called disclosure than I. Am I just too cynical to believe that this is ever going to happen? Well, my friends, that may be the case. But from everything that I have seen, I simply do not believe that any government, let alone the United States government, is ever going to drop that veil of secrecy that they have held up for decades and decades and decades now. I don't believe, my friends, I'm sorry, I just don't believe that the government is suddenly going to come clean. Could you imagine what that would be like? If suddenly the president would go on television and say, in 1947, a spacecraft crash landed in Roswell, New Mexico. And yes, we lied to you about it, but we did so because we thought it was in your best interests. And now, my friends, now we're going to give you the truth and explain to you what it is we recovered in the desert so many decades ago, and what we have been doing with that wreckage since that recovery operation happened in 1947. Could you really imagine the United States government suddenly doing that? Could you imagine this ever happening? Well, my friends, you can call me cynical, but I truly believe I am one of the most imaginative people I know. I'm one of the most open-minded people that I know. But still, with that being said, I myself can simply not imagine this ever happening. And while I, like many, wish that it will happen, I simply don't believe that it ever will. I do not believe that the governments of the world, especially the United States government, will ever drop the veil of that secrecy. I don't believe they'll ever give us the truth. And the truth, the real truth be told, I'm bitter about that. I'm angry about that. If the government really knows the truth of what's been happening, I believe that they should tell us. Especially those of us who have had an experience like I had, who have seen what I believe to have been a spacecraft from another world. Those of us who have had this kind of experience deserve to know the truth of what we saw. And if the government knows what it is that we saw, then I do not believe that they have any right whatsoever to withhold that truth from us. But what can we do? What am I supposed to do? Write my congressman? Demand that they give us the truth? Well, friends, people have tried that and basically gotten laughed at. I suppose it's a complex issue, and a solution to the problem of a so-called government cover-up is equally complex. I do not believe there is an easy answer for how to solve this problem of the government withholding information from the people. I suppose I just have no faith in the system of government that we have in the United States. In fact, it would be fair to say that when it comes to the federal government, I am quite possibly one of the most cynical and distrustful people I know in regard to the United States federal government and the things that it's willing to do to its people. And I'm sure that some people think I'm more than a little crazy for having such a distrustful view of the government. It's easy to think someone's crazy. It's much harder to look into their logic and decide if maybe, just maybe, they're right, crazy or not. Our government in the United States lies to us constantly. This has been proven time and time again. And despite that grade school and high school brainwashing you may have had about what a great country we live in, our government is one of the most corrupt on planet Earth. So the notion that they would hide something from the people, it's not at all hard to believe, folks. It's not at all a stretch of the imagination. If you look into things like the Gulf of Tonkin, the Iraq War, and other things our government has done, it's not a stretch of the imagination, folks, to believe that the government knows more about UFOs and alien visitations than they have been willing to share with their people. In fact, if you do your due diligence and do some research and read the documents, folks, the evidence, it's quite clear our government's been lying to us for decades. All my life, I have wanted to know the truth, both about what I saw and also about what our government knows about what I saw. And that search for the truth has made me a very curious, and some may say very dangerous man. It's a funny thing, but the truth is, curiosity can make you incredibly dangerous. Dangerous to those who are keeping secrets they have no right to keep. Some say obsession is a dangerous game, and I, my friends, am inclined to agree. I have done some strange things in my search for the truth, both about what I saw and about what the government may know about what it is that I saw. And what a strange journey it has been. From reading every book that I could find that may shed some light on what I saw, to filing FOIA requests with the government and getting back nothing, and then having to fight with them again and again to try to get the information that I requested, to exposing hoaxers, fraudsters, fakes, and fairy tale tellers who I believe have impeded my path towards getting to the truth. I've often felt like I was running with the ball in a football game, and there was going to be an awful lot of people that I might have to tackle and trample over to get to that goal line. And whether it's good or it's bad, folks, I've been willing to step on anyone I needed to bring myself closer to that goal line. But I suppose the truth, and it's a sad truth, is that I don't feel any closer to that goal line. I don't feel any closer to the truth. After all this time, I don't feel that I'm getting close to the answer, the real answer that I have been searching for about what it is that I saw and what it means. And it's a sad truth to realize that I have dedicated so much time, so much energy, so much passion to looking for answers that I just may not be meant to ever get. And what am I to do when faced with the possibility that I may never get the answers that I've been searching for? Do I throw in the towel? Do I give up? Do I try to forget what it is that I saw or what it may mean? Is it possible for me to forget what I saw and what it may mean? Am I able to just put this thing behind me and move on? To spend my time in better ways than this fruitless obsession? I don't know the answer, folks. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. But most of me simply can't give up. And this, my friends, is where I find myself. Still looking, still searching, still hoping that the answer is in the next book, or the next investigation, or the next research project, or the next document that I pull from a government unwilling to give me the answer. Part of me thinks that answer just may be right around the corner. But the truth is, I feel like those answers have been right around the corner the entire time I've been searching for them. And it's a tantalizing thing to think, if I just keep going just a little further, just do one more FOIA request, just do one more investigation, read a few more books, watch a few more documentaries, the puzzle pieces may just come together. We may finally get the truth. We may finally get the answer. But no, folks. So far, I have only been denied that which I have been seeking for some time now. And this tantalizing search for the truth that just may be out there, just beyond my reach, has aggravated me and made me an angry man sometimes. But what am I to do? I feel like I can't give up on this search. I feel like I can't stop what I'm doing. I have to. I have to know what it is that I saw that day. I have to know what it means. I need to know what I saw that day. I need to know what it means. With every fiber of my being, I need to know. I just need to know. And so I suppose that need to know is so strong that there's nothing I can do but allow myself to continue. But to allow myself, to give myself permission to keep searching. And so, my friends, I have kept up the search. I have kept up the good fight. And oh yes, it's a good fight with a worthy adversary. An adversary that refuses to lose. And I gotta tell you that sometimes I see some story on the news about UFOs or disclosure. Lately, I've been seeing news about this Storm Area 51 thing that's on Facebook, where apparently over 1 million people have signed up to storm Area 51 and get to the secrets that this corrupt government has been keeping from us for decades. And my logical mind knows that this is a satire Facebook group filled with funny memes about storming Area 51 and aliens. It's funny, it's entertaining. But there's part of me, an angry part of me, that wishes that this were true, that truly wishes that over 1 million people would descend upon what just may be the epicenter of the cover-up and find out what's really there. The angry part of me fantasizes, I suppose, about being one of those 1 million people who will run into Area 51 because, they can't shoot us all. And this, I suppose, satire, joke, Storm Area 51 turned into sort of a philosophical thing for me. Because I, like many, wondered what would really happen if literally 1 million people surrounded Area 51 and started walking towards that secret base. Now, anyone who knows anything about Area 51 or has been there may have seen signs which say no trespassing, use of deadly force is authorized. The security surrounding the base is oppressive. There are men with machine guns there to stop anyone from trespassing onto the base. But I, like many people, I suppose, wonder what would really happen. What would really happen, folks, if 1 million people surrounded the base and started walking towards those secrets? Would the government hired security people from Wackenhut, commonly referred to as the camo guys, that surround the base, really start shooting people? Would people fire on their own countrymen because they've been hired to do so? No. I don't think that would happen. And if there truly was over 1 million people surrounding the base, intent on walking right through it, how many security guards would it take to stop them? Would it take 100, 300, 1,000, 10,000? I mean, do the math, folks. 1 million people suddenly descending on a base and running right into it. Would they really be able to stop everyone? Would they really just start opening fire and start shooting people? Well, I don't know, folks, but this is an interesting thing to ponder. And I'm kind of glad this Storm Area 51 thing happened, just so we can think about these things. Maybe we can discuss them. Do you really think that a few hundred or a few thousand security guards would shoot over 1 million people that just decided to walk right onto the base and get the answers? And is Area 51 really the place where those answers lay? Well, I gotta tell you folks, I think that may be a fool's mission. Because maybe, just maybe, Area 51 just has top secret stealth aircraft and other things that the government is working on. To many people who have done their research, it would appear that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is more likely a place where those secrets of aliens, crash retrievals, and alien technology are actually held. In fact, there have been many stories of people that have worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that would indicate there are underground vaults under Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which contain, among other things, downed UFO spacecraft. Laboratories which study and attempt to back-engineer those craft. There have even been reports of cryogenic chambers storing alien bodies in these vaults under Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base contains the Foreign Technology Division of the Air Force. So certainly, this may be the place where something very foreign, like an alien spacecraft that has crash-landed, may have been taken. So are people wrong? Are there alien spacecraft in Area 51, or are they at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in secret vaults under some of those hangars? Maybe people shouldn't be talking about storming Area 51, but rather people should be talking about storming and searching Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But this storm Area 51 thing, I gotta tell you folks, has ignited my imagination, because I keep thinking, what would really happen? What could they do? What could the government really do if literally 1 million people decided to, let's say, peacefully march right onto the base? Open up some of those hangar bay doors and see what's inside. We are the taxpayers. We are the ones funding whatever secret projects are going on out there in that desert. And maybe, just maybe, we have a right to know what they're doing on that base. I don't believe that the government, especially with people around with phones and cameras and possible media coverage of just such an event, could or would actually just open fire and start shooting people to stop them from walking onto the base. So I suppose that's why I think this is interesting, because I'm sure they can't, it's true, they can't shoot us all. Now, I want to be very clear in that I do not want to wish harm on any of my listeners, and I would not encourage anyone to take part in such an event should it actually happen in September, as this Facebook group is claiming the event will happen on that day in September. I don't want to encourage any of my friends and listeners to take part in doing so. First of all, it would be illegal to walk past the posted no trespassing signs onto that base. And second of all, they do have the right to shoot you, apparently, according to the signs and according to, I suppose, some kind of law. I remember seeing an episode with Jesse Ventura of his show Conspiracy Theory. Now, he's a former governor, and he saw the signs that he'd be shot and thought, maybe I should just walk right on there. Are they really going to shoot me, a former governor of one of the states in the United States? Do they have the right to shoot a United States citizen just for walking onto this base? But I found it very interesting. He didn't walk onto that base. He thought better of challenging their authority to shoot him, and he backed off. And that, my friends, is very interesting. That someone who was a governor didn't have the courage to breach that border and walk onto that base. I don't want to say he didn't have the courage. Let's say he just thought better of attempting to walk past the posted signs that say you will be shot if you walk past these signs and breach this border. I found that extremely interesting. That even a former governor of one of the great states of the United States of America knew that it would probably not be in his best interest to walk past that border, to challenge their authority to shoot him. He didn't do it, folks, and I don't think you should either. And this brings me to another thought. What if people really do start marching right past those borders and those signs and start walking, marching right towards Area 51? And those guards and some members of the military open fire and just start shooting people. Imagine the outrage that would occur if that happened, especially if it was caught on film and on video. So I gotta say, although I realize that this Storm Area 51 thing is mostly satire, it's a joke, or perhaps a thought experiment, it still comes with many incredible questions to ponder, and it's incredibly interesting to think about what could happen, what would happen if over 1 million people just suddenly decided they were going to breach those gates. They were going to walk right into Area 51 and get the secrets that the government has been withholding from us. Now, it's interesting that there have been several stories where the Air Force has cautioned people against such a foolish thing to try. And most of those stories just talked about the incredible amount of security that they have on hand to deal with just such an incursion. But the truth, folks, the real truth is there's no way that they could be prepared for 1 million people to suddenly start walking, marching right onto that base. I don't believe that they are prepared for such an event. But it's interesting that the government responded and warned people that walking onto the base would be an incredibly bad idea. Now, most people seem to think this is all a joke and no one's going to show up and do it. But I have to tell you, I will be watching this story with interest in September on the date as it approaches to see if anything really is going to happen, or if it's all just a joke. Do I think that's really going to happen? No, folks. I think it's a joke and a source for thousands of funny memes about aliens from now until September. And then it will be a source of a bunch of jokes about no one showing up and so on. But it sure is interesting to think about, folks. Well, my friends, we are going to take a break right here. And when we come back from the break, I will finally tell the story, the entire story, of what it is that I experienced. I'm going to share my own UFO experience for the first time ever tonight. Stay tuned, folks. I'll be right back.
The truth is out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTLK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand 3 truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137. Now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247. Now only $147 shipped in 1 business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Get the Tea is the #1 cleansing tea in America. We cleanse you with organic ingredients, and when used daily, you can increase your energy. Cleanse from intruders that set up camp in your colon. Cleanse your colon and feel the difference. Colon cleanses can be uncomfortable. Not Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea is mild yet truly effective. Cleanse your insides every day. Easy to make, easy to use, and feel the results. Are you sold? Okay, then here's how to order. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Look for our specials on the front page. Get the Tea also carries top-rated supplements for those who care about their health naturally. Again, log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com and feel the results. And for those of you that arm yourself with information, come to our webinar every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can sign up at getthetea.com.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, the Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of The Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
This is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
This is Corbin, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
You are listening to the Midnight Show, available exclusively on The Fringe FM, with your host, Stephen Cambian, also known as the Mystery Man.
Welcome back, my friends, back to the Midnight Hour. I'm so happy that you all could join me for tonight, especially for tonight, because tonight is kind of a special occasion. I mentioned that I had my own strange experience. It's the experience that has made me so interested in these strange topics. Some would say it's the experience that made me obsessed with these things. Obsession is a strong word. I prefer to think of it as an intense interest. But whatever you'd like to call it, the experience that I had is exactly what got me so incredibly interested in this phenomenon. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about why some people choose to never share their experience if they have an experience like mine. Some would say that it's the fear of ridicule. I think there's definitely something to that. We all worry to some extent about what people think about us. I guess it's human nature to do that. And so for me, I'm sure that some part of why I've never really shared my experience, even with some of my closest friends and family, was, I suppose, worrying, are they gonna think I'm crazy? But then, my friends, I suppose you come to a healing of sorts when it comes to worrying whether people are going to think you're crazy. And that's the healing that I think I have come to. I've been looking into this long enough now to know that hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people have had an experience like my own. And I gotta tell you, folks, we can't all be crazy. Now, I'm sure some of the people that claim to be abducted by aliens or in contact with aliens or being visited by aliens, I'm sure, yes, some of those people are absolutely bonkers crazy, like mental institution bound crazy. Schizophrenia, I think, can play a part in many of those people's problems. Happen to have a member of my family who was a paranoid schizophrenic, and I have to tell you that that is a terrible, terrible affliction, and with it comes hallucinations, both auditory and visual. People who are paranoid schizophrenics can see and hear all kinds of things no one else can. I guess my point is, sure, some people who claim to have some sort of alien contact or sighting or visitation or abduction, sure, my friends, I'm sure that some of those people are mentally ill. But it can't be all of them. In fact, there are many sane very well educated, and credible people who have had this type of experience. I would like to believe that I'm one of those sane people, those grounded, otherwise normal people that had an extraordinary experience. In fact, when I think about the experience that I had, I'm quite sure that what I saw was not a hallucination. When I had my experience, it was before I had done any drinking, any drugs. I was quite young. In fact, I was only 10 years old at the time. I suppose I only mention this because one of the first questions that I have for someone that's had a similar experience is, were you drinking that night? Were you doing any drugs? I mean, it's a fair question. And I just wanted to take that and put it aside as not on the list of possibilities to explain what it is that I saw. And I suppose I should also mention before I begin that I grew up in Philadelphia. And I didn't grow up in a terrible neighborhood, but I grew up sort of next to the terrible neighborhood. I grew up next to a place called Kensington in Philadelphia. And if you search Kensington, Philadelphia, you will find that Kensington is the heroin capital of the East Coast, and it has been at least since I was a very young child. My father, God rest his soul, he's been dead for a very long time. He died very young. I think he was 54 when he died. So my father sort of had this philosophy of fatherhood, which was that if he just kept my brother and I extremely busy, we would be too busy to get into drugs and crime and, drinking and, the local street thug gangs that just ran around causing mischief and getting in trouble with the police. His theory was, I suppose, we never talked about it, but I really do believe that my father just figured, let's keep them so busy they won't have time for that. And his chosen method for doing that was camping. My father became the Cub Scout master and drugged me and my brother on hundreds of camping trips. Later, when we got a little older, then he graduated to being the Boy Scout master for our local church, Actually, he did a lot of good things. He helped a lot of children that didn't have fathers growing up in that neighborhood. And to this day, I still see people, that remember him. And, I see a lot of young men that say, like, hey, your father was awesome. He taught me how to do this or do that. My mother used to get angry with him because even after my brother and I had grown up and we weren't, Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts anymore, he was still helping other children. So anyway, my father would take us on all these camping trips and just try to keep us, he really did. He tried to keep us busy every moment. And if it wasn't camping, it was some kind of project like, let's paint this canoe and then we'll take it camping. Let's rebuild this rowboat and then we're going to go fishing with it. Like, he really kept us busy. And so, besides the Boy Scouts and the camping trips, my father also, his favorite place to go camping was New Jersey. If you're from Philadelphia, New Jersey is an amazing place with all these lakes and rivers and, hiking trails and state parks and campgrounds. I guess if you're from New Jersey, you just take these things for granted, Okay, so there's a state park over there, who cares? But when you grow up in the city, really, literally in a concrete jungle, going out into a forest or, rowing out with a canoe in this huge lake, it's really an awesome experience. And my father was huge on us having those experiences. So, New Jersey being his favorite place to go camping, my grandparents had purchased some land many years before I was even born. It was some kind of deal where you subscribed to all these magazines and you got to buy an acre of land in the Pine Barrens. And anyway, they built some little summer house cottage there. But later, I guess they got a little too old to keep up with the bills and the maintenance and the traveling there back and forth. So they sold it to my father for, sort of like the friends and family price, because these were my grandparents, my mother's parents, and they wanted to keep it in the family. So my father purchased it, and after he did, my grandparents and my uncles and everybody from my mother's side would still come and visit and stay with us there constantly. I remember growing up when I was very young, it was always cramped. It was like 2 to a bed, It was really, really tiny, this place. And it was always filled with people. We had all these family cookouts and all this stuff. And this summer house was in Browns Mills, New Jersey, which used to be a sleepy little summer town surrounded by the Pine Barrens and some lakes. There was a lake my mother would take me and my brother to, but after a while, how much swimming or, paddling a canoe can you do? You get kind of bored. And after a while, I would say, no, I'm not going to the lake today. I'm just going to, go ride my dirt bike in the trails in the woods. Or, I'm just going to go hiking today. And my mother was always kind of, honestly, I think she was kind of happy to be off the hook. Like, all right, I don't have to pack up all this crap and take you to the lake today. I'll just sit here and, come home by dark. And that's what I did. I spent all day and all night exploring the forests surrounding this sleepy summer home. It's also important for me to mention that Browns Mills, New Jersey, where this home was that I spent my summers, is right next to both Fort Dix Army Base and McGuire Air Force Base. McGuire Air Force Base and Fort Dix are right next to each other. Like literally right next to each other. And that's another thing that I would do. When I was a child, you get kind of tired of running around the forests around the house. The forest that surrounded that summer house directly connected right into land that was owned by both McGuire Air Force Base and in other areas, land that was owned by Fort Dix. And I remember my brother and I, being a little mischievous that we were, because my father always told us, there's signs posted, stay out of Fort Dix land, don't go on there, the MPs will, get you, you'll get in trouble, don't do that. And so what did we do? We went looking for those signs, that's right. And we found some awesome stuff on Fort Dix. When you're a kid and you find like a zip line or nets that you can climb, obstacle courses, of course we went there. They used to do the training real early in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon, they'd be gone until the next day. So we would wait. Once in a very great while, some MPs would come on patrol and see us there and chase us. And that was kind of fun, too. They never did catch us, by the way. So this is what I did. I spent all my time in these forests, running around in the hiking trails in the woods. I took a bow and arrow with me sometimes, and I would just find it, like a dead tree, and have target practice for a few hours, or set up a target, paper targets. I did some sort of bushcraft stuff and built like little shelters and forts and things like that. Once in a great while, I even just sort of backpacked a few miles into the woods, set up a tent, and stayed there for the night. It was an amazing place to grow up. And it was also, like I said, right next to Fort Dix Army Base and McGuire Air Force Base. Growing up, my father was a tremendous fan of aviation. He took us to the McGuire Air Force Show every year without fail. Me, I was bored. Kind of liked helicopters, kind of like jet airplanes. Everything else, boring. I don't want to spend my time looking at cargo planes and things like that. My father used to drive us, sit us in the hot car in the middle of the summer, and make us sit there for hours in front of McGuire Air Force runway watching planes land and take off. Now, interestingly, since the first Persian Gulf War, they closed off the entire base and you can't do that anymore. But when I was a child, you could sit there and watch all the planes take off and land. There was a little area you could drive in right in front of the gate. In front of the runway, there was this big, chain link sort of fence, and you could watch the planes for hours. And that's what my father made us do in a hot car in the middle of summer. I was not a fan of that. But interestingly, I think it's an important part of my story that McGuire Air Force Base is right next to where my house was. I mean, I could walk there to the runway. It would probably be 2, maybe 3 miles max to the main runway of McGuire Air Force Base from our house. Now, I mentioned these woods surrounding this summer house or cottage of ours because that is where my sighting and my experience took place. And it was a day much like any other. I had a little backpack with me, and I was listening to a Sony Walkman. Yes, my friends, a cassette tape player with headphones. And I was walking in the woods. Now, I had been out in the woods all day. I had gone fishing. I had shot my bow for quite some time. Earlier in the day, I was in a different part of the woods where there was sort of a tabletop ramp set up that me and a bunch of the other kids in the area would go to and jump our BMX bikes on. I mean, I had a full, long day out in the woods. And I would go back home periodically, get some drinks or something to eat, and then run and rush right back to the woods. So, in my memory, it was a day like any other there. A day that I had had hundreds, maybe thousands of. Every day I did this. I spent all day running back and forth between the woods and my house and back and forth, different woods, different lakes. Sometimes I'd go to one of the nearby creeks where there was like some deep areas and sunfish and tadpoles and frogs. And when you're a little boy, this is something to do. So the day was otherwise unextraordinary. It was a day like I had done many, many times before. But this day would be different. In fact, this day would be much, much different. As I recall, it was beginning to get dark, and I definitely recall looking behind me, which was the trail that would lead through the woods and across the creek back to the bottom of my street where I could, go back home. And I remember thinking, it's not quite that dark yet, and I've walked this trail 1,000 times. I'll be able to get to find my way back through and get home no problem. I'm going to keep going into the woods for some more time. With music playing on my Sony Walkman. Some of you may remember one of those, and if you do, you're showing your age like me. And I had this little backpack with some sodas in it and some other things and like pocket knives and, I don't know. And I walked into the woods during what I could only describe as, sort of early twilight. And I kept walking into the woods deeper and deeper. And I was coming up on what I was sure was a clearing up ahead because I had walked that trail many times, and up ahead of me maybe a half mile from where I was at the time, I remember thinking, the clearing's up ahead. Let's go and take a look at the stars. Off in the woods in New Jersey, it gets dark, especially there in the Pine Barrens area, when there's no houses for miles. At the time, there was no houses or any light source for miles and miles and miles. So it was kind of a common thing for me to do, to walk to that clearing, look up at the sky for a while, maybe see some shooting stars, and especially on a night like tonight, because it was a full moon that night. Oh, and I mentioned the backpack. Also, in the backpack was a pair of my father's binoculars that I would carry with me, especially on a full moon, and just look at the moon with the binoculars, maybe look at the stars. Sometimes there was airplanes flying overhead in the woods near my home. In fact, it was a very common occurrence. Like, we heard airplanes flying over our house constantly. It was almost like like I said, we were a few miles away from the runway. So we would often hear and see airplanes flying over our house going towards McGuire Air Force Base, or flying over our house coming from McGuire Air Force Base, flying on to their destination. So I have this pair of binoculars with me. The binoculars, my friends, is an important part of the story, because these were not cheap kid binoculars. These were my father's expensive binoculars, which, if he knew I had them, he would probably have been pissed at me. I wasn't supposed to use them or touch them. But luckily my mother was easy to sort of misdirect and grab them when she wasn't looking, and that's what I did quite often. I always was very careful with them, because, I was always afraid I was going to drop them and the lenses or the glass was going to break, and my father would have taken, a belt to me if I broke something like that of his. So I was always very careful with them, but I happen to have them with me. And so I'm walking on this trail towards this clearing. I began to smell something strange in the forest. Now, I mentioned that I had spent an incredible amount of time in that forest. I've seen every wild animal that, mostly just deer there, Occasionally you see a raccoon or something like that, but mostly in the forest there I would see deer. But I recall that the smell that I smelled was the first sign to me that something was strange, because it was not a smell that you would associate with nature or a forest or anything like that. It's kind of difficult for me to describe the smell, because I have thought about this a lot. How do you describe what it is that I smelled? Because it was not an extremely strong or overpowering or extremely evident, I should say, smell. But it was there. It was lingering. It was hanging in the air. And I definitely noticed it and was looking around for the source of this smell. If I had to describe it, I would say that it smelled like, sort of like a faint smell of an electrical fire. I don't know if that makes sense, but it smelled like an electrical fire. Later in life, I would smell ozone in a sort of like a chemistry class, and I guess ozone and the smell, the faint, very faint though, in the air smell of an electrical fire. If you've ever, like, I don't know, in your house, like, had an extension cord, like, sort of short circuit and burn, that smell is kind of what it was, but not so strong. When something like that happens in your home, like there's an electrical short in an extension cord or in a lamp or something, and you get that smell is very, very strong, right? It's sort of overpowering. It's so strong for a very short time. This was different in that it was nowhere near as strong, but it lingered for a long, long time. I would say I was smelling this smell, looking around in the forest, walking on the trail towards this clearing, I don't know, for a good 10 minutes. Interestingly, the closer that I started getting towards the clearing, the smell did become stronger, or maybe more evident to me. At first, when I smelled it, I was just kind of like, wow, that's weird. What's that? What's that smell? And then I put it out of my mind and didn't think anything was strange. But then I continued to smell it the further I walked up this trail. But the further I got towards the clearing, it became very evident that that smell was in the air all around me. It wasn't like you could ignore it at that point, as I did earlier, like shake it off, like, oh, something strange, I don't know, something in the wind, I don't know, whatever. Now, it's important to note that I'm saying that it had the faint smell of an electrical fire. There was no man-made structures. There was no power lines, generators, or transformers anywhere near the woods, because I thought maybe that could explain it later when I thought about it. Maybe there was like a transformer fire, if there was, some poles and electrical lines running through the forest to somebody's house back in the woods. Nope. There was no electrical lines anywhere. There was no transformers. There was no explanation for why you would smell something like ozone or the faint smell of an electrical fire. The smell simply could not be explained by any conventional or normal explanation that I could think of. So the smell lingered, became a little bit stronger, and I'm hesitant to even use the word stronger because I have thought about this experience, ran it over in my head thousands of times. I'm not sure that the smell became stronger or if the smell just became more evident and it became harder to ignore that smell was lingering in the air. The next thing I saw that really freaked me out, and I mean really freaked me out and scared me, it was very rare for me to see like animals in the forest and be really scared because I had spent so much time in the forest and mostly what I saw was deer. And deer never really scared me. I mean, once in a while you would walk up in a trail and there would be some big bull deer, big buck that didn't see you at first and he'd notice you and then suddenly bolt off, and that's a little bit, that's startling, but that's not scary. What I saw next after the smell was truly scary. I'm walking up the trail and I hear sort of like a faint commotion, I guess. The rustling of, the brush and things like that. And I was curious, like, what is making this noise? And I've thought a lot about this too. My friends, I have thought about every aspect of this experience a great deal. The sound that I heard was hard to place directionally. I knew that it was in front of me, but it seemed like it was on the sides of me as well. Suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I see two very big buck deer running, galloping, bolting through the forest, jumping over stumps and smacking into trees with their antlers. The ferocity and the speed that they were running, I have never seen a deer run in my life. Suddenly I heard rustling like that on the other side of me and saw, I believe it was 3 or 4 deer, and 2 of them appeared to be very young bucks because they had just had, horns just barely sprouting from their heads, and you could see from the size, I remember from the size of them, they were young, very young, maybe 2 years old, or even less, I don't know. And they too were bolting, galloping at a speed that I had never seen any deer run. They were smacking into things and looked like they looked terrified. Suddenly, I began to worry that there was some hunter in the forest shooting or something, or threatening to shoot them. I don't know if they were smart enough to see a gun and get terrified and run, but I had never seen deer do this. So on one side of me I had two huge bucks, and they were booking, running through the forest by me. They ran right by me so fast it was difficult to make out that they were deer, but I had been in the forest enough. I was sure they were deer. I could see the antlers. It wasn't that dark, and my friends, I mentioned it was a full moon, and it was really like a hunter's moon, because even though it had started to get pretty good dark, you could still see most things in the forest. You could see the trees and the outlines of the trees. You could see the path. It wasn't that dark yet, and there was moonlight. Next, I began to worry, like extremely worry, that there was some nut up ahead shooting at the deer, maybe with a bow and arrow. That's why I didn't hear, or a crossbow. That's why I didn't hear a gunshot or anything. And you never know. The thought occurred to me, maybe it's a hunter illegally hunting with a silencer. Now, I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I have heard stories of poachers doing that so as not to alert the landowner that they're on the land poaching animals. So that was my concern initially. I had, upon hearing all of this ruckus and brush rumbling and literally hearing the gallop of a bunch of deer running right by me on both sides, I literally forgot, almost more or less forgot about the smell in the air. I was more concerned with what may be a poacher up ahead with a gun with a silencer, and that's very dangerous in the dark, in the forest, and so I sort of froze when I saw this, both because I was afraid to show any emotion to what may be some nutjob hunter up ahead with a gun, and also out of fear. The next thing I remember is that I heard rustling lower, or it appeared to me to be lower, and just then I saw some raccoons and possum. I believe it was one possum and a few raccoons, equally terrified and bolting and running right past me. Those came much closer to me. The deer maybe were 100 feet on each side of me, maybe 50 feet, the closest one to me. When they bolted by, then I start seeing raccoons, and I believe maybe badgers. I think it was 3, maybe 4 different things. There was definitely an opossum, there was definitely a couple of raccoons. Oh, a skunk, my friends. And a skunk is something that you don't want to see or be near in a forest ever, especially if the skunk is terrified. So then, my next thought after the hunter was, oh my God, I'm going to get skunked here and my mother's going to kill me. There was a lot of skunks around that place, and that was always a danger, and my mother and father always, don't you get skunked. If you see a skunk, you run, you leave them alone, don't go near them, because a lot of kids in that area and a lot of dogs had gotten skunked. So I see some raccoons, a skunk, a possum, all booking, and these animals were moving faster than I had ever seen, and they looked terrified to me. And I even recall one of the deer sort of looking back, the opposite direction that it was running, with a look of terror in its eyes. Next, I see a bunch more deer come booking through the forest, a few more right directly in front of me that I almost literally had to dodge out of the way of as they were booking and running towards, I suppose, safety. Now at this point, I'm still a good distance away from the clearing, and I decide that maybe getting to the clearing, if it's some nutjob hunter, would be a good idea, because then he could more clearly see, hey, I'm a person, not a deer, if that's what he was doing. But then I remember thinking, why are these other animals running if it's a deer hunter? It didn't make any sense to me, and I was immediately confused and sort of puzzled and sort of more worried now, because why are these animals running through this forest right at me in such a manner that I had never seen? And it's important to note, friends, that I had been in the woods and been on tons of camping trips with my father many, many times. I'd seen all kinds of things in the forest. This was definitely an out of the ordinary, extraordinary, really happening. This was not an ordinary occurrence. This is not something that happened to me before that I could explain. And that's why it really scared me. And in fact, those deer running at me was enough to sort of terrify me and get my adrenaline pumping and my heart racing. But I knew enough to sort of try to calm myself, because there could be, like I said, some hunter or poacher right in front of me with a gun chasing these things. And that's, my friends, very dangerous. There's been many instances of people getting shot because they were out in the woods without like an orange vest on, and I'm sure it was summertime, I should say. So it definitely was not hunting season, and I remember thinking about that while this was happening. Like, it's got to be a poacher because it's not hunting season. And my friends, you have to realize that out there in the Pine Barrens, there are some, I don't want to say hillbilly, but there are some, forest kind of people, and some of them are very poor, and they depend on the meat from the forest. They don't have money to go to the supermarket. They know how to go hunt deer, and some of those people don't care if it's hunting season. If they're hungry, if their family's hungry, and they need meat, they go out and they do what they need to do. And I remember thinking that as well. Maybe it's one of the locals, and they really need the meat. And so, I couldn't blame the guy. But again, the speed at which these animals ran right by me. I mean, like I said, they were, especially the male deer, were like smacking their antlers into trees, just continuing to run, not stopping for, any obstacle, jumping over things, running, and I mean booking. Like, I also remember recalling that they were running as fast or faster than any horse that I had ridden at a full-on gallop. Like when you get a horse and you really get that horse moving as fast as he can, that is the speed at which these deer were running through the forest right past me, and I had never seen deer run that fast in my entire life. So I'm a little distance away from this clearing, and I decide getting to the clearing is probably a good idea. If it is a poacher, I can make sure that they see me much better in that clearing by the moonlight, whatever, because really I was faced with two choices: turn around and go further back down the trail, cross the creek, and try to get home before I got shot at or something, or I could go further up to the clearing, which was ahead of me. And that, my friends, is what I decided to do. So I begin to walk. Really, I think I was more than fast walking. It might have been a slow jog towards that clearing. And I'm looking around and I hear more rustling. More deer come charging, blasting through the forest at me as I'm trying to get through this trail to get to the clearing. Finally, I can see the clearing. It's probably a few hundred feet from where I was at the time. But again, here come another few deer blasting right by me. At this point, my anxiety level and my fear level had risen significantly, because this wasn't a few deer, this was many, many deer, and every time I started calming down and I started, getting a little more level-headed and my anxiety level would lower, boom, boom, here comes more rustling and more deer jumping out at me, running, bolting, galloping right past me, and then my anxiety level, my fear level jumped up again. I got startled, I would say 4 or 5 times by 4 or 5, maybe 6 groups, and there was always more than one of these deers. There was always like 2 or 3 of them every time this happened. And so my anxiety level kept rising and rising because I kept getting startled. Every time I would calm down a little bit, boom, it would happen again and scare me all over. And I guess it had an accumulative effect to the point where at the time, by the time I could see the clearing, I was absolutely terrified, because by this point I was thinking, I don't hear any gunshots. There's no explanation for why these animals are doing this. So I finally see the clearing just up ahead, and I remember distinctly believing that if I could just get up to that clearing, I would be safe. Just then I hear another bunch of rustling and see, this time, small animals once again blasting, bolting by me so quickly that I couldn't even tell you what they were, but I know that they were smaller animals. Running, blasting, just charging past me. And it was then, just then, that I remember looking around and experiencing that smell once again. I had sort of forgotten about the smell while the deer and the other animals were blasting past me, but now I recall realizing once again that smell was in the air. The next thing that I remember is feeling sort of a strange breeze through the forest and through the nearby trees. The breeze was enough to sort of make the trees sway. Ever so slightly, but still it was a noticeable effect that there was a slight wind in the air and that trees were beginning to sway. I looked up, and some of these trees are very tall, and remember seeing all of the trees sort of swaying ever so gently back and forth and back and forth, and again smelled that strange smell. The smell of ozone or electrical fire faintly in the air. Next, I distinctly remember that I began to feel an electrical charge in the air. It was making the hair on my arms literally stand up. That's how strong it was. It wasn't like an electrical shock. I can't really relate it to anything except maybe if you've ever, put your hands on like a Van de Graaff generator or the static electricity from a balloon in your hair. And even the hair on my head sort of began to feel electrically charged somehow. The next thing I know, I was looking up at the trees swaying once again, and I began to see a shadow begin to cast over the trees directly in front of me, blocking out the light of the stars and blocking out the light of the moon. It was a strange sensation. It was sort of like a wall of darkness was coming towards me, above me. I looked above me, and I struggled to see what it was that was casting this tremendous shadow or wall of darkness coming towards me. And I saw a silvery gray, I suppose you could say, hull or bottom of something. My first thought initially was, it must be some huge airplane, like the cargo planes my father had watched with me take off and land from McGuire Air Force Base. I remember distinctly thinking maybe this plane is going to crash land because it was way too low. What I saw was just 10, 20, maybe 30 feet max above the top of the trees, and I could see it through the trees, but it was massive. My next thought was, it's not a plane, because it was moving ever so slowly towards me. If I had to guess, it was moving at like 5 miles an hour or less. And I remember thinking that an airplane couldn't stay in flight moving that slowly. An airplane would not be moving that slowly. I struggled in the moonlight in that forest to see better. And suddenly, I began to see the huge outline of this thing that was covering a huge portion of the forest I was in, treetops. It was above the trees, but it was covering a huge area. It was silvery. It appeared metal to me. I remember distinctly thinking that it was metal. It was silvery but dull gray at the same time, if that makes any sense. Suddenly I began to see more detail in the moonlight and realized it was an elliptical object. It was circular. The bottom of it was very circular. And I could see the outline of what most people would call a flying saucer. It appeared to me to be perfectly circular in shape. But it covered such a huge area that I remember thinking that it had to be 300 feet in diameter, because I related it to my house, and I remember thinking it's the size of 20 or 30 or 40 of my house, my summer house, I should say, which I believe that building is something like, 20 feet, not 20 feet, maybe 30 feet long and 15 feet wide, maybe 30 by 15 is the size of our summer cottage. And I remember thinking so many of my house could fit in the space that thing is taking up. The next thing I realized is that there was an eerie silence in the forest all around me. There was not a cricket chirping. There was not any sound, but dead silence. Then I distinctly recall hearing what I can only describe as an electrical hum, a very, very faint electrical hum. The next thing that I realize is that my Walkman suddenly stopped playing. I looked down at it, and it was completely and totally dead. No sound whatsoever coming from it. I tried to flip to the radio while this was happening. That Walkman was completely and totally dead. Dead silent. I wasn't very concerned with the Walkman. I was more concerned with this incredible, strange thing that was above me. And once again, I began to see more detail as it came closer and closer towards me. And that wall or shadow that it was casting above me reached right to my feet almost. And I remember looking down at that shadow, this huge shadow that this thing was casting in the later sort of twilight, early night. The next thing I know, this huge, incredible object above me was literally overtaking me. The edge of it passed over me, over my head, and began to slowly drift over me. I watched in absolute awe, in utter silence, totally perplexed and unable to explain what it was I was seeing with my own eyes. The object was right above the treetops, and the trees sort of stopped that swaying and were utterly still and equally as silent as the rest of the forest and me. I didn't hear anything except that incredibly faint electrical hum is the only way I could describe it. Other than that, the object was completely and totally silent for an object of that size. Suddenly, as this thing was about a quarter of the way past me, right above me, I remembered that I had binoculars in my backpack. I frantically dropped the backpack and was digging for the binoculars. Now remember, this thing was only a few hundred feet above me, just above the highest treetops. My recollection is that I could see parts of the bottom of it through the tree line. I could see, I could look up and see trees covering portions of it, but I could see other parts of it. I took out the binoculars, looked straight up at the thing, but could only see sort of blurred, silvery, dull metallic, dull gray, what I can only describe as metal. But one of the other things that I noticed instantly is that I could see no rivets, I could see no seams, I could see nothing that looked like man-made structures. I could see no doors on it, no portals, no windows. Now it's important to remember at this point that I'm only seeing the very bottom of it. And what I saw just seemed to be sort of like a dull, shiny, almost reflective, dull gray, dull silver, but still kind of reflective like a mirror, metal. It seemed very glossy and very smooth. And I was immediately astonished once again at the size of it as it continued to slowly pass over me. Once the object had passed over my head, and I'd say that took a good few minutes, and for a time I was in the shadow of this thing. I was directly below it as it was passing over the tree tops. I kept trying to focus the binoculars to see more detail, but all I could see was this shiny, glossy metal bottom of this totally round object. Later, I would sketch it and I would say the bottom of it was completely round, but the object itself was sort of saucer-shaped and elliptical. Sort of like you took a globe and squeezed it down about halfway or 3/4, take a perfectly round sphere and squeeze it down 3/4 of the way. That would describe the shape of the object. It took a good few minutes for this thing to pass completely over me, and as soon as it did, I turned around and I, again, with the binoculars and with the naked eye, I kept switching back and forth, tried to see more detail. And as it passed over me, I could see the sides of it, which appeared to me to be, again, seamless, dull metal gray, circular object, hundreds of feet in diameter. Then I could see the top of it, which perfectly matched the bottom of it. I saw no portals, portholes, windows, doors, no fins. I saw no visible means of propulsion like jets or engines or exhaust vents whatsoever at all. Then this thing began to rise up further up into the sky. And again, I recall the trees began to sway again. And I felt that electrical energy in the air. And I also believe that I felt some sort of strange force that maybe I would describe as gravity pushing on me, but it was very slight. It wasn't an overwhelming effect. Like, I didn't feel the force of like jets blasting at me. I felt this sort of subtle energy pushing ever so slightly down on me and the ground around me as this thing began to rise up. It rose up to a point of maybe a few hundred feet above the tree line. I remember that I was struggling with the binoculars, again focusing and trying to get a better view of this thing. It rose up several hundred feet above the tree line, and then I smelled more of that strange smell, and it became stronger, that strange smell. And that hum sound, that very slight electrical hum sound, like an electric motor off in the distance running or something, intensified. It got, I don't want to say louder, I don't believe it got louder, it got sort of higher pitched, like something winding up. And then this object, which was bigger than anything I'd ever seen in the sky, completely and totally, literally blasted off at a speed that I'd never seen any man-made object go. It was quite like it was there 1 second and literally gone and completely out of view the next. But I distinctly remember seeing this sort of blurred, almost like remnant of it as it shot off into the distance. You know, you could see almost like a speed trail, or like the object blurred, blasting off. But again, I saw no engines, I saw no jets, I saw no propellers, I saw no visible means of propulsion. And that quickly, as quickly as the experience came to me, the experience ended, and I was left there in the forest with only questions. And now, my friends, after all these years, I realize that I may never get the answer to all those questions. But that hasn't stopped me from persistently asking those questions. Until next time, folks, my name is Stephen Cambian, also known as the Mystery Man, reminding you that the first step to receiving the answers you seek is being brave enough to ask those questions. Good night, folks.